Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Brewing the American Dream webinar presented in partnership with Accion and Samuel Adams. My name is Meredith Medlin, and I'm glad to have you with us today. During this chaotic time for small business, we are proud to support entrepreneurs like you through access to capital and educational opportunities like this webinar. And we're very grateful to our national food and beverage partner, Sam Adams, for their commitment to small businesses. While everyone's first concern during this pandemic is their health and the health of their families, the Brewing the American Dream team is also focused on supporting small business owners right now. Today's webinar will address questions relating to suppliers, ingredients, and inventory in an environment where your business operations might have had to change recently. We've got a fantastic panel of speakers lined up for you today, but before we begin, I want to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. First, you should be able to view our presentation through the Zoom Webinar Tools window on your desktop if you've joined us by computer. Next, you will see a chat function in the Zoom Windows black toolbar. Please use that chat button to type in any questions you may have throughout the presentation. I will administer a question and answer session following our discussion based on the questions that are typed into that chat window. We are recording today's webinar, so you can refer back to the information presented today at a later time. I will send an email containing a link to that recording shortly after this webinar concludes, so be on the lookout for that email. It will also contain a very brief 2-minute survey that gives you a chance to tell us what you think of today's webinar. Please do take just a couple minutes to give us your feedback after this discussion. And now I am pleased to introduce our panel for today. Sandra Patterson is a purchasing manager at the Boston Beer Company. Jonathan Young works with Sandra as a buyer, and Doug Ramsey serves as print production packaging manager at Boston Beer. Many thanks to all three of you for being with us today. So let's get started with our first item for discussion here. So Sandra, if entrepreneurs haven't seen any interruptions in their suppliers so far, how can they proactively ensure that those interruptions never come?
Sure. First, hi, everyone. Nice to be here. So to answer this question, it's one of the important keys is the relationship you have with your supplier. And that means communication. Constantly have communication with them, especially in the time that we're in. So I would say, you want to set up some type of weekly communication with them and ask them questions. Find out from them, if they can give you some insight into the item that you're looking to source from them. Is there a potential shortage coming, their way that they see, or are they kind of feeling comfortable that they have enough inventory and stock to help you with whatever your needs are future. As long as you're working with them and you really have a great communication with them, they should be willing to help you and kind of saying, hey, if we're going to go into a shortage, can you guys give me a heads up? This will give you the time to understand if you have, if you can afford to take more stock on, or if you can work with them to kind of pace out and hold some stock for you. We've done that a few times where it's like, listen, I can't afford to take this on right now, but if you can put something away from me and I can use it by, 6 months down the road, within 6 months, that would be helpful for me. The second thing that you can try to do to keep from any interruptions in your business is having a second supplier qualified. It doesn't mean you need to go with them right away, but it's always helpful to have a backup. Not all suppliers that do the same thing are being affected equally. We had one supplier who was being told they were seen as non-essential. And I went to a second supplier that we have ready, and they're like, hey, in the state I'm in, we're still working and we are a family-owned business. So they're allowing us to continue because it's just family running it. So that really helped us to know that I had someplace else to go should my first supplier be shut down longer than, the need is, if I needed more and he was still going to be closed. So it really helped. It does help to have that flexibility, to have somebody else qualified, ready to go to help you with your needs.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, certainly to keep those communication lines open, but also keep those options open for sure. Thank you. So our next question is kind of related and thinking about the those interruptions that we might be having to deal with in these businesses. So Sandra, for folks who have seen those interruptions, how would you approach a supplier about those issues?
Like whoever gets the first PO in, then people get it.
Similar to, it kind of, like you said, it's right up there with number one. Again, it is the communication. Be very, honest and fully transparent with your supplier regarding your needs. They may be willing, and they should be willing to work with you. It's hard to when you're a small business versus a large business, but even when you look at a company that you think is large, compared to their supplier, they could still be considered small. So if you have a really good relationship with your contact, they can always help work something out with you. As I stated before, you may need a certain ingredient or a certain item for your finished goods, and you can't afford to take it in right now. So what you can do is, and they may be telling you that we are running low, but they can hold off, as long as there's a promise to use this item or to order this piece that you need. So again, that's where the communication and the relationship building really does come in. I think it goes a long way if you show them that you are a partner in this and not just a customer that will jump from them to somebody else, because it also means business for them. They could also be in the same position as you are. So it's a full relationship and being upfront and honest. If you can take goods in, right now, even though it might hurt your body, it might hurt your wallet, it could help you in the long run because you'll have something when everything gets back to normal. But if not, knowing that your supplier has those goods waiting for you, and you're just gonna, you promise to pay with, to order those items in 4, 5, 6 months down the road, it helps them too because they know that they have something coming in.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart kind of workaround to, if you can afford it, to sort of pre-order a piece, or to know that they can earmark it for you to keep their business afloat as well. I know you talked about those important questions about if suppliers are seeing any shortages in their business, or if they can see anything coming around the pike. Are there any other important questions that you think small business owners should be asking their suppliers right now?
Yes, and the first thing is, there's, and everyone's heard it before, there is no stupid question. If you're thinking of it, then that means it's a concern for you. So it's something to ask. And, one of the questions we've started asking during this time is of our suppliers are, do you see any issues in the future? So some of the items we source, we may be getting here domestically, but they might be coming from someplace else. So it's asking them, where is your product coming from? If it's a direct manufacturer, then you can find out from them, hey, are you, make sure, like, long-term, do you have the product in place? Where are you getting your product from? Where do you get your raw materials to make the final product for us? And isn't that in good standing? If you're working with a third-party supplier, then what is their supplier base looking like? Do they have more than one supplier that can help you get your goods? Are they just relying on one person, or do they have a second and third supplier to help you? That's really where it comes. Direct manufacturers are going to know exactly what they have and how to help you, but ask them, what do they see coming in light? Is short-term great, but long-term could be affected? Or is right now long-term, like some places may still be closed? We've talked to a few suppliers that are like, listen, I'm still potentially, we're doing back-end work, all the office work, but we're not in production right now. We're planning on being in production at this time. Ask them if they can give you some of that information, some dates, something that you have to work with, something solid that you can start to plan. Because if you don't know how they're being affected by their own suppliers or by their own goods, then you have you're really not thinking forward for yourself. And what you need to do is tell them that you want to think future, not just short term in the next month or two, but 3 months down the road. Because something that's happening now that might seem like plentiful could be hurting us in the back end if we're not getting it, if it's not being built, or crops aren't coming in, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's really, yeah, absolutely. Kind of thinking through the various aspects of the supply chain. So not just to your immediate supplier, but, 2, 3, 4 steps down the line, and also thinking a little more long-term with the timeline and trying to get a sense of how it might affect the business, in a few months from now. I think that's really smart. Thank you. So the next question we have also concerns if you're seeing these interruptions in your supply chain right now. So Doug, I'm interested in your thoughts on some common tricks, or if there are substitutes that people could consider for things that might be running low right now. How can people think creatively about what they can use instead?
Hi guys, how you doing today? One of the things comes down to if it's like one of your primary ingredients that you use all the time that you're finding a shortage on. You generally, like Sandra said earlier, you want to have a backup supplier in mind for when times are tough like this, because you'll usually be able to find somebody else that will be able to supply you any type of ingredient that you need, or some type of packaging substitute that you need. If it's, if you're using food containers, there's generally other options you can find on the internet or through other suppliers. One thing that we're doing around here in Massachusetts is if you're looking for ingredients, a lot of restaurants now are starting to sell ingredients that you might not be able to get out of your local grocery store or where you get them supplied from right now. So that's another thing that you could look into too, is trying to figure out how you can be helped on a local level. And then you're also helping out a local business as well that has an abundance of, let's say, flour or, other type of baking needs that they're not using 100% of, and they're trying to help make a profit as well. And they're looking to help out the community too by selling it to you guys. And that's one of the ways that you guys can get really creative is just trying to find out what is available around your local area. A lot of resources for shipping have been delayed. You're looking at 2 to 3 weeks sometimes to get some certain things that certain companies just aren't stocking right now because they don't deem it as an essential property or an essential item. So best bet would be, take to the local groups on Facebook, on the internet, reach out, be like, hey, does anyone know where we can get something like this? Or do you guys know where we can get something like this? Or I heard that the restaurant down the street's doing this. Are we doing this in our neighborhood as well? So those are some of the ways that you can really get kind of creative about getting restocked. And it's always, if you get an option to purchase it, buy as much as you can stock right now, because you don't know when it's going to open up again. And, there's no problem with pantry loading if you can afford it and if you can store it. So that's basically what I have right now for adapting your supply chain.
Thank you, Doug. I think those are some really good ideas. The idea of working with a restaurant that maybe has some ingredients or inventory that they can't use, I think is super smart. I've not heard that before. So thanks for sharing those. Jonathan, anything to add on how folks can get creative if their inventory isn't getting restocked right now?
I think like they always say, necessity is the mother of inventions. Mm-hmm. And trying times like this are they become the great showing of how folks can adapt and invent to meet the current needs. And like this, you can go kind of two ways with looking at ways to get creative for restocking inventory. The first would be kind of the importance of relationships and community. If you can't get goods, but maybe your neighbor or one of your counterparts in the business can get them, you can always pull orders. It's a good way to, if your business is not consuming as much raw goods as you would typically need, you can still hit your minimums and just kind of spread that across a couple other folks who need them. The other way to look at it is what other opportunities can you look at for kind of like new revenue streams. I have some good friends who have a barbershop who they obviously can't be cutting hair right now, so they started doing T-shirts and other merchandise to keep themselves afloat and to keep a revenue stream coming. Even at Dogfish, the customer needs changed. That people can't get hand sanitizer, so in a matter of 2 weeks, we took something that would typically be a very long process to get up and running, and we were making hand sanitizer to supply to the state. So it's just a matter of looking at new pathways, new opportunities, and really finding the best ways to serve your community in these times.
Yeah, thanks. I think those are really great ideas, both kind of pivoting to another revenue stream, particularly if there is an item that you can get stocked that maybe you don't normally even ask for, but if you can find a good price on it and can find a good way to sell it within your brand. And then also the piece on collaboration. I think we're seeing more and more of that, of businesses working together and community organizations coming together. So those are some really great ideas. Thank you, Jonathan. We have another example kind of question here, because a lot of the folks who work with Brewing the American Dream, a lot of these businesses sell at either farmers markets or like open air markets, things like that. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about the supply chain issues with kind of moving from that type of person-to-person selling to an online platform. So Doug, any ideas or thoughts on what folks should be considering with regard to their supply chain as they move to a different selling format like this?
Yeah, one of the things you're going to have to take into consideration if you are moving from a farmer's market to an online service, or at least is how are you going to get it from, let's say, your house to someone else's house? Like, do you have to go to UPS? Do you have to go to the UPS store? Is your UPS store open? Are you able to have UPS or FedEx come to your house to do a pickup? One other thing is, if you are selling online, you want to make sure that you do have enough time added in for delivery time. I know we all see, like, a lot of things are now taking, like I said earlier, 2 or 3 weeks to ship because of all the other items that are shipping right now. But if you're able to potentially ship something within 2 to 3 days and not have your customer wait, that's going to bring them back again and again and again. But you're going to have to figure out a proper way to actually ship your good to your customer that's going to protect it and get it there, safe and sound. So that way, when they get your product, it's not damaged. It's still fresh. Those type of things you need to take into mind. Also, one of the other things is, are you just taking orders online and you're going around? If you're doing just local, are you just dropping them off at people's houses? Are they okay with, how you just going up and dropping them off on their doorstep? Or are you okay with having people come to your house and pick them up on your doorstep? So those are all ways that you can kind of get away without having to, pay for UPS or FedEx freight. But basically, the main thing about shipping is protecting the product and making sure that the box that you buy to put it in, that you can ship it and will protect it, and it's not floating around in there. It's not getting all banged up, because people are paying for your goods and services. So you want to deliver them top of the line items. So that's the best thing I can say for you with that, if you're looking to go online.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You don't want to order a whole bunch of cookies and then have them all show up broken. That would be really sad. And I think it's sometimes when we're trying to figure out how to get creative and do something new with the business, it can be a little challenging to think through all of those like individual pieces of getting the right, shipping materials and then getting it to the right place, all of that. So thanks for talking through that with us. And then the next question we have here for Jonathan, if you could talk a little bit about how folks should think about what this is going to do to their finances. Are there increased costs that might come as a result of having to get creative with supply chain interruptions? Or we're all seeing, just much, much lower revenues, but are there increased costs folks should be prepared for as well?
Yeah, I think along with not only increased costs, but just the variables in the costs and the new costs that you're going to take on by looking at these new channels of doing business. I think any change that you make in your business model, definitely run the numbers, get an idea of like packaging materials and shipping costs, like Doug was just saying, and build out your margin and make sure that if you are making changes to adapt to the current supply and the current market, that you're taking those into account with the costs that you're going to then charge to your consumers.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And sometimes it's just helpful to get a little bit of the math done before you kind of wade into those waters. So thank you for explaining a little bit on that for us. So now we are going to turn to questions from the audience. So guys on the phone or on the computer, if you have any questions, just type them in to the chat box and I will read them out to the group. So you can use that chat button in the Zoom window to type in any questions you have. And I will go ahead and get us started with the first question here. Sandra, I think you might be able to help us with this one. As you were talking about having those proactive communications with a supplier, but sometimes those relationship dynamics can be a little tough, particularly if the supplier is a very large company and the business owner, is a really small account for that supplier. How can folks kind of be creative or get around the problem of an unresponsive supplier if they're just really trying to get in touch and not really hearing back or hearing back in the way that they would like to?
That's a great question. And that's where it's difficult when you do work with a larger company. You're not as big of a customer for them that they may not necessarily be returning your call first. So that's why, one, I did say, it's making sure that your contact person, you and that contact person have a really good relationship. There are sales people out there that I'm sure we've all dealt with that, you kind of get that feeling like, I'm just a number, I'm just a sales to them, versus a company that actually values you and doesn't kind of see, the end. They're like, they see you as, as one of their customers, no matter what you're bringing in for them. So if they're not responding back to you, again, do you have that secondary supplier to go to? That's why it's kind of important to make sure that you're not just dependent on one supplier. And it's not just for the fact that, you might be a smaller company and they don't want to return to you. Their business could have been hit really bad. Anything can happen to them. So if you're solely relying on one point of contact, that could hurt your business, along with it's hurting themselves, it's going to hurt you. So if they're not returning your call, the first thing I would do is try to reach out to someone else on the team that if you have more than one contact. But otherwise, really, we're doing your research to find out if there's another company then that can help you. If it's not so specific item that you need, like, a certain type, in beer, if they're like, I need this certain type of hop or this certain kind of malt. If you're working with an ingredient or an item where you may need, something that's a little bit more generic, then there's got to be someone else out there that probably can help you. So while you're still maybe waiting for the first supplier to come back to you, reach out to a second or third supplier, even if you haven't vetted them through yet. It will give you options.
All right. Thank you very much. I think those are some good problem-solving tactics to try for sure. Alrighty. The next question we have is about shipping. So Doug, I'm wondering if you can help us think through shipping costs. Can you recommend any online shipping platforms? We've got somebody on the line here who is having trouble meeting the shipping minimums to get the commercial discounts from companies like UPS or FedEx, and the shipping costs right now are almost as much as the product. So any ideas about how to kind of get around some of that, cut the shipping costs in any way?
Hold on one second. I know that there's, and I was just looking it up online right now. I do know that there are a few companies out there, websites out there that are kind of catered to the smaller business. I myself are not particularly too. I don't know a lot about them. I live in a world where UPS is right there at the tip of my fingertips. So I've never actually had to use one of these online websites, but I imagine that it's something that they just try to utilize some type of rates that they get with, like, most likely the United States Postal Service or something along those lines, because maybe that company as a whole gets a deal through UPS, FedEx, with the USPS, and then how it works is they transfer those discounts onto you if you choose to ship with them.
Okay.
A couple of them are ShipStation, It's an e-commerce fulfillment site. And there's a if you search consumer affairs, they just released an article on February 21st about to provide services for businesses and consumers featuring online ordering.
Okay.
And there's a few others too. So I would just recommend probably doing some research, online shipping companies, and a whole bunch pop up, and that's as far as my knowledge goes on that stuff. So I apologize for not knowing a lot about it, but
Oh, it's okay. No, I think you're definitely right that the best thing to do is look up the different options and learn more about them and what they could each mean for your business before you just go with the first one you see. So I think that's a really smart approach.
yeah, it looks like someone in the comments posted in that they use pirateship.com and they're able to get a cheaper business account with UPS or the post office. So that's thanks from LaShawn for helping out there.
Yeah.
This is Jonathan. I just wanted to add to it. Before Dogfish Head came on board with Boston Beer, I managed the retail website. So we actually did use ShipStation, and we had costed out a lot of different options. We'd use stamps.com. We had bought directly through UPS and through kind of the pooling of all of the accounts that are currently on ShipStation, since that is like such a huge platform. I'm not trying to give them a pitch by any means. I think all of these different programs have both their benefits and their shortfalls. But yeah, Pirate Ship, ShipStation, any of those different sources, and stamps.com, if you're using USPS, is a pretty killer resource. They just pull everybody's resources and you can hit those bulk numbers like Doug was saying.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for helping us answer those questions, Doug, Jonathan, and LaShawn. Thanks to you as well for the pirate ship recommendation. Another question we have here, I'm wondering, Jonathan, if you're from the buyer perspective, if you can help us think through if folks are on limited budgets right now because their revenue has gone down so much during this crisis, how might you think about prioritizing your purchasing if you need to either leave some things off or stagger some of your costs? What can you help us think through on prioritizing those purchases?
That's always a tough question to answer from like a really general point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I think all businesses have kind of what they call the long tail, where was it 80% of your, or 10% of your product does like 90% of your sales, and the remaining 90% does 10% of your sales. In these times, you focus on those big revenue drivers. If you have to cut anything, kind of like the nice to haves in your assortment can be cut. But those things that are really going to have the greatest margin and the greatest volume of like product movement are the things that you should focus on putting your costs into.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So if it's, maybe having to go down from 5 flavors to 1, your best selling flavor, or, limiting some of those products, really purchase the supplies that go into your best selling item. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, paring down that assortment, focusing on like everything that's historically proven and that people will currently be seeking. That's the best way to invest.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, we've got another question. This might be a tough one because I know that you guys are much more in the supply chain and purchasing world than food safety, but we had somebody ask about food safety recommendations for purchasing. And just out of curiosity, maybe Sandra or Jonathan, you can speak to this. Has Boston Beer implemented any sort of additional safety with the virus around how you're purchasing or sourcing goods right now, or is it a little bit too general to speak to at this point?
I don't have the expertise to speak to restaurant raw goods purchasing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to misspeak on that topic, but we could definitely get some information on that.
I do know from watching the news the other day that here in Boston and a couple of its local towns around it, they're being required to put stickers on the packs from like when they were received, and if they are selling goods to other consumers, they are required to label them efficiently, say where it came from, how long they've had it for, and stuff like that. So the restaurants themselves are being tasked with having to let the consumer know where it came from and what's the fresh by date and stuff like that. So they're being tasked with a couple extra regulations on their own if they want to be able to sell, raw materials, raw ingredients to consumers like yourselves.
It goes back to what Sandra was saying earlier. Like, there's no such thing as too many or a bad question. Like, if you're looking into that as a method of your a channel of your supply chain, ask every possible question that'll come to mind, because there's no such thing as being too safe in those situations.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's also difficult because this is such a volatile situation and things are changing every single day. It's hard to know what the best recommendation is. It's as far as the safety, I feel like it's changing every day. And so just continuing to ask as many questions as you need in order to feel comfortable, I feel like is some of the best advice we can give on something like that. Alrighty, so anybody else have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box for us and we can continue to answer those questions here. But I'll just take a moment. If you're joining via computer, you can see on the screen right now, we have 2 URLs listed here. The first is the Brewing the American Dream Facebook page, which is a great place to follow along, especially in these times when we can't be together in person. We're not holding any of our regularly scheduled Brewing the American Dream events throughout the country, but you can really stay connected and learn about resources and different opportunities that are provided by this partnership on that Facebook page. So I definitely encourage you to follow along with us there. And then the second URL that's listed here on Accion's website is just a little bit of information about a summer digital engagement program that we're going to be offering through Brewing the American Dream to help these small businesses try to get a little bit more back on their feet and get some expertise and networking options available during this really difficult time as we try to look to rebuild, and hopefully, in the summertime we'll be back outside. So I encourage you guys to look at both of those resources as you have time and availability. And lastly, I want to thank Sandra and Jonathan and Doug, all 3 of you, for spending your time with us this afternoon and giving us your expertise. I really appreciate the partnership here, and I know I've learned a lot, and I imagine everybody on the line has as well. So thank you to all 3 of you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that concludes today's webinar. I appreciate the time, and I hope everybody can join us in a few weeks. We're going to continue to have more and more of these opportunities available. So we will see you on the next webinar. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.